Call to order the External Relations Committee meeting for Thursday, July 21st. And first on our agenda, we have approval of the May 19, 2022 External Relations Committee meeting minutes. Do I have a motion for approval? It has been properly moved in second. Let us vote. Motion for approval of the May 19, 2022 External Relations Committee meetings has passed.
Madam Chair, how did I vote?
I don't show that you voted. At least what I'm looking.
Conspiring against me.
It's, oh, okay. Well, let's not conspire against Mayor Floyd. You didn't touch it? And it says, well, now it says you abstained.
Is Dean Malice here? Can you find out who has infiltrated our system?
Mr. Worthy, have you voted?
I did not sign in time,
You did.
but I am in favor.
You are in favor. Okay, let the record show that Mr. Worthy is in favor. All right, number two on, again, the motion for approval of the minutes from May 19th has passed. At this time, number two on our agenda is a resolution authorizing the extension of the Hope Atlanta contract for homeless outreach services. Resolution number L47029. We will hear from Lyle Harris, our Senior Director of Customer and Employee Experience. Mr. Harris?
Thank you. Good morning, Chairwoman Scott, members of the executive team and the External Relations Committee. My name is Lyle Harris. I'm the Senior Director of Customer and Employee Experience. And I come before you today to speak on behalf of a resolution authorizing the extension of Hope Atlanta contract for homeless outreach services. Next slide, please. I'm going to go through the program, how it began, how it started, some of the funding details that we've been able to keep this program going, the impact that we've had through our outreach to the unsheltered population, so some of the successes and challenges, as well as what we plan on doing with the program to improve it going forward. Next slide, please. As you may well know, the MARTA Hope program, as we call it, which stands for Homeless Outreach and Proactive Engagement, started in the midst of a perfect storm of desperate and profound challenges, including the...
Excuse me, Mr. Harris. I've been told to ask you to speak a little louder, please.
I'm sorry. Yes.
Thank you.
Sorry about that. Again, the program was launched in 2020 when we were going through some very severe, profound challenges, not only locally but internationally with the COVID pandemic, and the COVID cases were rising and were still pretty high when we started the program. There were some changes to the airport policies around unsheltered people who were taking residence in the atrium, and that was forcing many of them to get on MARTA even more than they had in the past. We were also facing a lack of shelter space in the area that continues to this day, which made it more difficult for people who needed shelter to get somewhere to safe and warm to stay. And also there were concerns from our own customers about security, their own personal security and safety. They just did not feel safe often when they saw unsheltered people on the trains and buses. Next slide. In response to those challenges, what we did was we decided to start this program with 4 basic tenets in mind. First and foremost, we wanted to make sure our customers did in fact feel safe and secure when they were riding MARTA. We wanted also not to criminalize homelessness. We didn't believe it was a crime and shouldn't be treated that way. And although police have been very supportive in our efforts with the MARTA Hope program, we didn't want to turn this into a police enforcement issue. We also wanted to figure out a way that we could actually help people who were riding our system who needed the services and shelter that we thought we could be helped to facilitate. We also wanted to begin to collaborate with some of the other social service organizations, as well as the public agencies that were addressing homelessness and affordable housing issues, which we've done and which I'll talk about in more detail a little later. Next slide. So we started with a very modest budget of $123,000 in the first year of the contract, and that grew with some small modifications, 2 small modifications of about $60,000 each, and brought us to $180,000 for the hiring of 2 case managers who actually went out on the rail system primarily and engaged with people who were unsheltered and helped to direct them to services. And that's what we've continued to do, but with more case managers that we're able to bring on board as a result of a second year increase in the contract. Thanks to the board, we're able to bring that amount up to $468,000. And we now have been able to hire 6 case managers in addition to the original 2, and they're able to do a lot more coverage than obviously we were with just 2. In the third year, and that's what I'm coming before you to ask, is for basically to maintain that level of funding for the contract for another 12 months from August of this year to July of 2023. Next slide, please. So again, I just want to give you a little bit of an idea about what we're doing in terms of the coverage and the staffing. As I mentioned, we have 6 case managers who are working during weekdays and weekends. During the weekdays, they work from 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. and from 2 o'clock in the afternoon to 11 o'clock in the evening. Then we also brought on the additional 2 case managers who are working on the weekends from 7 to 3 on Saturdays and Sundays. We've also, and this is a key component of what we've been able to do, is that we've been able to secure 5 shelter beds at the Gateway Center, which we were able to do last year. But just in the last few weeks, as a matter of fact, we're able to find shelter beds, which have been extremely difficult for women who needed shelter at the Mary Hall Freedom House in Sandy Springs. And that's a new development that we think will help have a huge impact on what we've been able to do with this program. Initially, when the program started, we had field protective specialists who report to the MARTA Police Department. They would accompany the case managers out on their daily rounds, but they're no longer doing that. Instead, we've equipped the case managers with radios that give them direct access to the rail control center so that if they have any issues or problems or anything to report, they'll have a direct link. They also stay in contact with the MARTA Police Department by dialing 4911. So far, we haven't had any problems. It's been working out great. So we think that transition has been fairly successful. We've also, as I mentioned before, we started out with just coverage on the rail system. We've since included now bus shelters, streetcar stops, as well as parking lots. And we've found that there are a lot of people experiencing homelessness at those locations. Next slide. So what have we been able to do for the last 2 years? Up until just last month, we've been able to engage more than 6,000 people. We've got 1,700 people, more than 1,700 people who have accepted assistance, and that assistance can include anything from shelter to getting help with food stamps or mental or social services. And then we've had most of the cases we dealt with have been people who are telling us that they were not interested in accepting our services. So those are very high numbers, and we're working to improve that in the next year. We've been able to connect more than 500 people to shelter. More than 1,000 have been referred to Help Atlanta or some other providers for services that they might need. And we have we've reunited 55 people we've encountered with their families, which is an important demographic group that we want to increase as well. Next slide. Most of the people that we're encountering on the MARTA system have been homeless either for a fairly short period of time or a very long period of time, which means that they're more hardcore cases and more difficult to address their issues. But we're looking at some ways that we might be able to be more effective in that regard in the coming year. Next slide. We're also seeing among this population that there are people who have severe mental health as well as substance abuse and alcohol abuse problems, and that's something that we're also looking to work on in the coming year. Next slide, please. We have had more than our share of successes, which I want to brag about just for a moment. We have increased awareness about this program. both externally with our customers. We've been doing a lot to let folks know. We've recorded videos, we posted information on our websites, we've had social media listings talking about what we're doing with the MARTA Hope program, as well as letting folks internally know that we have this program, and especially frontline employees on the operations side. They have access to the MARTA Hope office that we have at downtown at 5 Points. We've also shared information in operators running boards about the program, how to reach the case managers, and what to do if they encounter someone who's homeless. So we've had some successes in that area. We've also been able to, I think, incrementally, and this is more anecdotally, but we have gotten emails and social media posts in support of what we're doing, and we're working to continue to make people aware of what we're doing through the program. And we also, obviously, and this is sort of a high point, we want to make sure that we're having an impact, a positive impact on the outcomes of some of the people who are riding our system and seeking refuge. We've also been doing more to increase communication with the local social service providers, as well as with the governments that are involved in homelessness, addressing the homelessness issues. And also, MARTA has been working with a group of other transit systems around the country, trying to find ways to address the problems, some of which are more severe than we're experiencing here in Metro Atlanta. One of the things that we're most proud of is that we have a new resource, a new asset who just recently joined us from LA Metro, a young man named John Gordon, who was very involved and instrumental in managing their homeless outreach program in LA. And one of his first tasks is he's working on what we call the Chronicles of Hope, which is the annual report that we have slated to finish in the next several weeks. And this Chronicle of Hope will give you more detail on the numbers and the demographics of the homeless population that we're trying to assist, as well as some of the stories of successes that we've been able to achieve through the program. Next slide, please. Mr. Durrett.
Lyle, could you explain what a CX manager?
I'm sorry, customer experience manager.
Thank you.
Thank you. In addition to the successes, of course, we have challenges as well. Some of the changes in leadership at Hope Atlanta, which was initially our partner and remains our partner to this day. The executive director has left the agency, as well as some of the other leadership of that organization. There's still, like I mentioned earlier, a lack of safe places that unsheltered people can find safe refuge, and that means that they'll continue to seek refuge on MARTA. We have to manage customer expectations, because I think there's a perception that we're going to fix homelessness, and that's not something that MARTA can ever do, or something that's beyond, obviously, our scope. We want to also increase those acceptance rates. As you saw earlier, that we have a lot of people who tell us that they're not interested in accepting services, so we're trying to figure out ways that we can improve that metric. And also avoiding mission fatigue. This is very discouraging and difficult work. We have to maintain the levels of passion and persistence and patience, because often it takes several encounters before someone will actually accept help. So that's become something that we're very mindful about, and we try to keep each other's spirits buoyed, but it's very difficult. Next slide, please. So moving forward, here's what we plan to do with the funding, hopefully, that we'll get for the extension of this contract. We want to renew the Hope Atlanta contract for 1 year. And we want to do, during the course of the next year, we want to heighten the visibility about the program to the public, as well as with MARTA stakeholders internally, our employees, to let them know that these services and this program is available and what we're doing. The third thing we want to do is we want to conduct a point-in-time count, which is basically a census that the city of Atlanta, Fulton County, DeKalb, and other jurisdictions do to get a sense of what the size and the scope of their homelessness population is. We think we need to do a specific one just for the MARTA system, and we plan on doing that in the next year. We want to also work closely with Chief Crayer, MARTA Police Department. He's recently appointed to the City of Atlanta Public Safety Commission. We'll be supporting him in getting involved in those meetings, as well as the Affordable Housing Task Force that General Manager Colleague Greenwood serves on in the City of Atlanta. We want to make sure that we have a significant seat at the table so we can influence those policy decisions that will be made in those forums. We're also going to continue, while we continue to work with Hope Atlanta, we want to put out an RFP asking other organizations such as like Hope Atlanta and others who are working in the Metro Atlanta area on homelessness issues, if there's for ways that we can improve the reporting, we can improve some of the outreach activities, we can improve more of the survey techniques and tactics that we're currently using. and also looking to figure out ways that we can transport people who we encounter on the system to locations, to destinations. Often we'll make a referral, and there'll be a bed somewhere else, or there'll be an opening for a service that someone needs, but they're unable to get there. So one of the things we're looking at is providing transportation, and we'll be putting out an RFP asking organizations that might be willing or able to provide those services. Next slide. So in order for us to maintain the level of staffing and coverage that we currently have, to maintain the beds, the 10 beds that we've been able to secure at the Mary Hall Freedom House for Women, as well as at the Gateway Center for Men, I come before you today asking for a request approval of the resolution authorizing the extension of the Hope Atlanta contract for homeless outreach services. And with that, I want to thank you, and we'll take your questions.
So, thank you, Mayor Floyd.
Well, thank you. You're one of the real heroes to me, having dealt with this situation over the last years. And you said a couple of things that really struck me. One is, and I don't know that I'd ever really thought about this, is that we're not going to fix this problem. I mean, we can't do that. And I think it's one thing that local governments and people that live in these cities and counties may not always realize. If somehow you've got to address the issue, like you said, of changing people's expectations about what the result of this is going to be. And I know that's not an easy fix at all, but I think basically that one thing we can do is help some of the people that are in there. And that seems to me to be what you're trying to do, is to figure out a way to do that. A couple of cautions, and I know you know these things, but I can tell you that homelessness is not a 9-to-5 problem. And most of the time, and you're in local government and you get a call about a homeless problem, it's after the homeless offices of all in the DeKalb County or City of Atlanta, they've closed and gone home for the day. And all of a sudden then, instead of a homeless problem, it becomes a police problem. And once it becomes a police problem, it becomes worse and unmanageable and unfair in some cases to the person that you're dealing with. And I don't know how MARTA, whether we're restricting the hours to when we're operating trains or buses, or how you're doing that. And I'm not asking that question now. That's just in my mind about how do we deal with this issue when somebody's on a MARTA bus and the homeless people are not there to deal with them. Do we call the police? How do we deal with that kind of thing? So anyway, I commend you for what you're doing. I'm 100% in support of this program. The one thing that struck me when we talked to DeKalb County, their homeless office, about this is they have plenty of money. They really are, the resources are there for them to do more than what they're doing, but they're really at a loss for how to deal with this issue and how to help with it. And I think the more that you guys, meaning Hope Atlanta, but the DeKalb County people, can communicate and talk among yourselves about how we're going to deal with this, not fix it, just deal with it, becomes a problem. So anyway, thank you for what you do. Thank you for this presentation, and good luck with this budget.
Thank you so much, Mayor Floyd. I appreciate that.
Sure.
I can't see, have a question, Mr. Durrett?
I wanted to suggest that we put the resolution forward and get a second, and then I would like to speak to it.
So are you making a motion?
We need to do it electronically.
Pardon me?
We need to do it electronically.
Right, but I'm asking him.
Well, as soon as you hit the button.
It's moved.
Is there a second?
There we
Mr.
go.
Work, there we go.
Now we can do it.
Now we can do it. Yes. Discussion.
Lyle, thank you for bringing this forward to us. I'm absolutely going to support this, but what I want to ask is, at the Buckhead Coalition where I work, we have a homelessness committee. And we have been trying to learn all about this so that we can be really thoughtful about how we can lean in and be supportive of different measures. We don't want to create something new. And I would like to ask that the best person possible representing this program come and speak to us so that we might discover whether or not the Buckhead Coalition might be able to become a partner in this. with resources of all kinds. And so I really like that. A question that I have, the point-in-time census,
Yes.
would that be timed to happen at the same time the census is done, the annual census is done, so that we're adding the MARTA system to the population that's being surveyed?
So the point-in-time count is done in usually done on a single night in January.
Right.
As it was this year, and it had been suspended previously. MARTA had participated in 2 of those counts in the city of Atlanta and in Fulton County, DeKalb County. So we have some of the population that was counted during those census counts included folks who were on MARTA. But what we're thinking is that we would do a separate one, and to your point,
Okay.
we might do it on the same night. We haven't decided that yet. We might do it on the same night, or we might do it on a separate day, so we could get a more clear baseline of what our population looks like. Because again, it's sort of lumped into everything else that was in the city of Atlanta and DeKalb County. And part of the issue, and I think I've mentioned this before in previous presentations, there really isn't a lot of collaboration among the counties, the various jurisdictions. This is not a criticism. It's just a fact of the matter that they often don't collaborate as effectively as they could. So it's hard for us to figure out in a piecemeal way what more holistic solutions might be out there. But one of the things we're going to be looking with the point-in-time count is whether we do it on the same night as the other point-in-time counts that are done across the region, or do we just do one for MARTA on a separate night.
May I follow up with you about finding the right person to come and speak to our group?
Yes, and really, I just wanted to say briefly, the case managers that we have now with Hope Atlanta are extraordinary human beings. Many of them, I think all of them, in fact, have lived and experienced, have been either homeless themselves or have dealt with substance abuse problems. They are very passionate, and they are the lifeblood and the heart and soul of this operation. And again, I'm just trying to make sure that we can do as much as possible, but I would love to have one of them, 2 in particular. I'm thinking about the 2 founding case managers. I would love to have them come out and speak with the Buckeye Coalition, absolutely.
Thank you, Lyle.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I have a couple questions. In looking at the resolution, I saw the amount of beds being reserved for men and women,
Yes, ma'am.
but I didn't see families or children. And the reason I asked that is, ironically, I received a call and it's a little bit emotional for me. I had to get involved with a family that was homeless, that was staying in an AT&T parking lot. And this young lady moved here to take a job with AT&T and had 7 children, and they were living in their SUV. And as I began to make calls, I called the Gateway Center, which I know is part of the United Way, and I called and reached out as well to the Urban League, who was able to help and with some emergency housing. So when we talk about community partnerships, I know in DeKalb County we have a community police department now where they're looking at homelessness in the jurisdiction, and specifically also at train stations, and how they can help. And I know this because I've been working with them as well. But I know the other question about families is, I noticed with the Urban League, when they help with the homeless families, they have to sign for a pathway to go, how they plan to go, what plans they have to go from homelessness to not being homeless. So do we have a follow-up program? Are we working with the homeless, those that are homeless, to help them no longer be homeless that are interested in not being homeless?
So your first question, thank you very, very much for both of those. Your first question about families who are in homelessness, there are actually more services that are available to them beyond the MARTA system. Why we focused on single men and single women is that is the bulk of the population who are riding MARTA. You often don't find families, though of course they're out there, you don't find many families who are riding the system like that. And it's very difficult to find shelter beds for single women. There are resources available for families, women or parents with families, but the other cohort is very difficult to place. And it took us actually pretty close to it, almost a year, to find some beds for single women. But we continue to work with some of the other partnering agencies to find resources and to work with them to provide those. But that's one of the things we're looking to do in the next year as we put out this RFP.
Thank you. In the jurisdictions, I know Mayor Floyd mentioned DeKalb County. I know they have a community police department they've created to deal with homelessness in DeKalb County. And specifically, it was in regards to getting calls from MARTA regarding those sleeping on the train. Say when a person is homeless and they are put off the train in the county or the jurisdiction, they need a place to go there. And so that's where I've been told with DeKalb County they get involved.
I'm not familiar with the DeKalb County, this new organization that DeKalb County has stood up, but we're willing and ready to work with them, absolutely.
Great. I will be glad to put you in touch with the lieutenant that's over that.
Thank you.
A clarification, are we improving a $468,000 budget or a $936,000 budget?
468.
Well, the resolution says it increasing it from 468 to 936.
That's the total. That's just the total cost, but it's just another. It's because it was a 1-year extension, so that's it's really
That's a
just
2-year number then.
right.
Okay.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Hearing none, let us vote. Thank you. Mr. Harris, the resolution has passed.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your time and your support.
Thank you. Next on our agenda, we will have a briefing from, it looks as if though Ms. Fisher wasn't able to be here today. So we're going to have a briefing from Ms. Colleen.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair Scott, members of the committee, colleagues. Please, I request your graciousness. Stephanie is not feeling well today, so I will do my best to present on her behalf. Her excellent work. This is our media impressions from March to June 2022. Next slide, please. In March, we issued 13 press releases. Our federal successes, this is both our bus and bus facilities grant for the Clayton O&M facility in the amount of $15 million plus our 3 congressional earmarks. And Kali testifying at the Senate Banking Committee received the most news coverage. MARTA was mentioned 1,310 times in March, which was a $19 million advertising value equivalent. 94% of the news stories in March registered as positive or neutral in tone. The small amount of negative news coverage we got came from a settlement reached with the family of a contractor killed in 2018. Next slide, please. In April, we issued 16 press releases. The launch of our electric buses received the most news coverage, with several broadcast and print outlets attending the successful launch event at Edgewood-Kingler Park Station. MARTA was mentioned 1,770 times in news stories, equaling $25 million in advertising revenue, the highest of the quarter. 78% of the news coverage was positive or neutral. Deaths at Midtown and 5 Point stations resulted in a higher than normal negative news coverage. Next slide, please. In May, we released 10 press releases, and the grand opening of the King Memorial TOD received the most news coverage. MARTA was mentioned 337 times, equaling $10 million in advertising value. 85% of the news coverage in May registered as positive or neutral. The negative news coverage came from a death at East Point Station. Next slide, please. In June, we had Rail Talk Reconnect. The relaunch of a popular interactive art installation received a lot of great coverage and was featured on one of 16 press releases sent. We were mentioned 1,100 times and had a $13 million advertising value equivalent. 68% of the news coverage registered as positive or neutral. A shooting at Peachtree Center Station and the search for the suspects resulted in more negative news coverage than we typically see in a month. Next slide, please. Oh, how cute. Questions are at the bottom of the art. happy to take any questions. Otherwise, thank you for listening.
Mr. Pond, I can't see your light,
Okay.
but I saw you move the,
Okay.
Go
Colleen,
ahead,
good report.
please.
Quick question, more of mechanics. You mentioned example June, 1,100 media contacts, whatever, and 68% were positive. I'm just curious how you track the positives and negatives. I mean, that's 1,100 stories or whatever.
We read them all and we send you a summary every week. No, the answer is we have a group called Meltwater that tracks it for us. Thanks for the question.
any other questions or comments? Hearing none, thank you for
Thank
the
you.
briefing. Are there any other matters to come before the External Relations Committee? Seeing none, hearing none, we are adjourned. Next, Mr. Pond with
The first item on the agenda are the approval of the minutes. I can't see if everyone's voted. I'm trying to, it looks like they've passed. Thank you very much. And now we have a briefing. Emil, you're going to come up and tell us everything we want to know about audit at MARTA, right?
Absolutely. Mrs. Hardich, Mr. Srinath, members of the MARTA board, good morning. Thank you for your time today, and thank you for the opportunity to give you a brief update on the internal audit activity for Q4 of MARTA's fiscal year 22. Next slide, please. I will begin with the operational audit group. For the quarter, we were focused primarily on compliance type audits, which came pretty clean. I won't go through all of them. A couple of them probably deserve mentioning. One is the COVID-19 grants audit. We looked at various different grant disbursements and fund application. We did not find any issues in the sample that we selected. Everything seemed to be done by the book and came up clean, which is good news always. Another one that I'd like to always mention is the audit of the MARTA Police Property and Evidence Custody, which we do every year as part of the certification of the MARTA Police Department. And that audit also came up clean based on the audit procedures that we executed. We had one audit that was in the report writing phase, and I will report on that one, the capital project soft cost, in the November audit committee meeting. So overall, fairly clean from a compliance standpoint audit quarter. Let's go to the next slide. These are audits that we have discussed in prior quarters that we keep tracking because they still have significant findings that are being remediated. So I won't go into the details. I'm pleased to say that many of these findings are being closed as we speak. I would just highlight, for example, the non-revenue vehicle audit, which was done 6 months ago. And 3 of the 5 significant findings have already been closed, and 2 of them are in the process of being closed. So bus operations, actually should say bus maintenance, is taking a good proactive approach to close these findings as quickly as possible. I have to give them credit for that. And we have a couple of other things or other audits that are still in process. We're diligently following up on every one of these significant findings. We don't just close them. We want to make sure that they're being really closed. So good work on behalf of management there. Let's move to the next slide. This slide talks about the information technology audit group that we have. We closed one fairly extensive audit. That's the first one on the slide, the TCSN pen test findings remediation review. And I will expand a little bit upon that. TCSN stands for Train Control System Network. This was a penetration test done by an external specialized firm in this sort of pen testing activities. It was done approximately 2 years ago. A number of vulnerabilities were discovered in the process of the pen testing. I won't go into the details because this is a safety sensitive topic. What we wanted to do, because of the cybersecurity nature of this, is see if the vulnerabilities have been fixed. We reviewed in detail every one of them, and some of them had been remediated and some of them are yet to be remediated. So one of our missions here in internal audit is to diligently follow up with the responsible parties within the authority to make sure those 10 that you see that are labeled significant get remediated. So I will report the board at every one of our meetings the progress of the remediation of those vulnerabilities. And again, in the best interest of the authority, I will refrain from a technical discussion of what those vulnerabilities are. In addition, we have 2 audits from an IT perspective that are in progress. Those are not necessarily directly related to cybersecurity, but they're indirectly related to that. One of them is a disaster recovery audit of our Oracle system. It's very important because in case of some sort of a disaster, whether it's a random thing or whether it's the result of a cybersecurity event, we need to be able to recover Oracle quickly because it's a critical system for the authority. And the second one is third-party IT risk management, where we are examining sort of our contractual approach to cybersecurity as it relates to our vendors and providers of IT services. So pretty busy from a cybersecurity perspective. We will remain focused in that area as it's especially important now, given the global political environment and the tensions around the world. So we remain very, very focused and very, very diligent. Let's go to the next slide. These are audits from an IT perspective that we have discussed in the past. Some of the findings are being remediated or are in the process of being remediated. And we are following up with both IT and cybersecurity to make sure that those things get fixed. Some of the dates are at the end of July, end of October, so many of these will get reported either as fixed or past due at the November Audit Committee meeting. Let me move to the last but very much not least in importance audit area. Let's go to the next slide. This is the contract audit group. Very busy quarter for the contract audit group. They issued 23 audit reports. Most of them with low risk, 3 needs attention and 1 is high risk. 43K in identified cost savings. At the same time, we received 20 new requests for new audits, which we are processing as we speak. So a busy quarter, which is not unusual for Q4. Let's go to the next slide. From a fraud, waste, and abuse, the top part of the slide is previously reported allegations and investigations. I'd like to update the board on the first one, which had to be placed on hold since the person involved is on a leave of absence. We'll see how we proceed. We'll probably wait a little bit longer and then make a decision. The second one, also previously reported. Internal audit completed the investigative work. The report was sent to management and the appropriate personnel measures were put in place. The third one was investigated by MARTA police. I read the investigation report. No substance was found or the allegation could not be substantiated following their investigation. The fourth one was also completed by internal audit, and substance was found in 2 of the 3 employees that were involved, and management took the appropriate actions from an employee standpoint. During the quarter, we received 2 new allegations, and those are really related to timesheet abuse or timesheet inaccuracies. We have begun the investigation in both of those cases, and by November, I should be able to report the outcome of those 2 investigations. I have noticed that during the COVID pandemic, when we were working more remotely, we had very few investigations, but as we have come back, we have more investigations to deal with, which is not unusual. Let's move to the next slide. A very brief summary of the entire year and the internal audit department in terms of productivity. The contract audit group was very, very, very busy. They had attrition as some of the other groups, but they did produce 101 audit reports. It's rare that we cross the 100 per year, but even given the intensity of our capital program, this is not unusual. So they're staying extremely busy and extremely productive. Cost avoidance, $253,000, and unsupported cost of $5.5 million. We issued 17 performance audit reports between the operational audit group and the IT audit group. Also a very productive year. We had one advisory engagement related to space utilization after we all came back, and we gave this to management. Hopefully they'll make some good decisions as a result of that. And then we completed 8 fraud investigations during the year. So despite attrition, we stayed pretty busy. We were able to absorb the work with the existing workforce. We don't use consultants in our work, so we just use our own employees. Next slide. Some other noteworthy events during the year. We implemented, as I reported to the board in November, a new robust fraud hotline technology called Lighthouse Services. We automated a lot of our previously manual activities and really went into the 21st century from a hotline perspective, which is part of our technology transformation strategy within the internal audit department. Which ties to the second bullet. The Government Technology magazine reached out to me and wanted to do an interview and a case study with MARTA Internal Audit. And they actually published that case study in April, and I put like a copy of the first page in Government Technology magazine highlighting MARTA and MARTA Internal Audit as a successful case study of digital transformation within the internal audit space. So that was a good thing both for internal audit but also for MARTA from a brand perspective. We filled 3 of the 4 vacancies during the year. It's a tough environment to hire professionals. The unemployment rate is low, and what people demand in terms of salary and teleworking arrangement is very difficult to meet in many cases. And then finally, we did sign an agreement with the external audit firm for the next 5 years, which takes care of the requirements of the MARTA Act for the next 5 years, so that we're compliant with the provisions of that as it relates to external audit firm and external auditing. So overall, a successful year for internal audit within the MARTA world. Next slide. Madam Chair, this concludes my briefing of the internal audit activity Q4 and fiscal year 22.
Thank you so much, Emil, and I do want to congratulate the audit. That's a wonderful story that you've got here to be able to be published for the work that you all are doing.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Do I have Mr. Pond?
Emil, and I know it's still an investigation, but in cases where you have workers that falsify timesheets, and theoretically that becomes a fact, how do we deal with those situations? What is the end result for how we address that employee's behavior?
When the investigation finds a substance that was a fact, we actually refer this to the C team member who's over that area. They might pull legal, they do in most cases, and they make a decision what disciplinary action they need to take given the facts. What internal audit does is document the facts and provide the supporting information, and then the C team member along with legal and HR make a decision how to handle it. It's not unusual for the person to exit MARTA at that time. So I'll just leave it at that.
Any other questions, comments? Thank you so much. We
Thank you.
appreciate everything you all are doing.
Thank you.
Are there any other matters that need to come before the audit committee today? If not, we are adjourned. Record time. Way to go, guys.